My name is Jonathan Parks, and welcome to Jonathan's Nature Crafts. I must inform you that I do not live in this house by myself, but live here with other people. Sometimes other members of the household may have to walk through areas where I might be recording with other family members on the phone. If you hear any noise like that, please feel free to disregard. We are doing our best to get noise-canceling equipment, which may at least keep you from hearing exactly what is being said. Thank you for considering. Well, this was a little moment. I wanted to get back on and kind of show a few other things and probably continue a little bit today to talk about shepherds and sheep as we will, because I want to first of all mention that those walnut shepherds I was sanding yesterday, they have already been labeled and laminated. They're over there in the shop, kind of get their finish put on them. I finished sanding a couple of avocado lambs to go with one of the walnut shepherds and got a couple more left, and decided we might kind of continue to talk about shepherds and sheep a little bit while we kind of work on this. So probably just thought this would be a good time to continue out my little devotion about shepherds and lambs and all sorts of other things. And so I'd say as we're coming down to it, there's probably a piece of sandpaper around here. I laid down here somewhere, but it was just the grit we needed to sand this tough avocado wood. And probably I'd say maybe it's this one we got here that's pretty much been practically used, because we already sanded the last two while I wasn't recording. So I think I'm going to come along here, take care of that for now, and just share a little more. Like, I'd say I was at a church one time where the pastor could kind of speak up in the pulpit and tell us just some little things about shepherds and about how in those days, you know, shepherds were often looked down upon. They probably weren't kind of quite as good dressed and, you know, as much attired as they are now, because in those days it was often said that shepherds were just kind of considered dirty, stinky people, as far as the way the pastor put it, and probably didn't have the best clothing. It was probably often stated that their beards were kind of dirty and straggly, and they were the ones who the angel was sent to while they watched their flocks over the mountains to bring them to the inn or to the barn and see the baby Jesus in the manger in the stable. But I say that there's also more that gets said to it than that, because it's like these days, you know, we also know that sometimes pastors and ministers are considered shepherds according to Scripture. We know that shepherds in the Bible were often called overseers to their flock of sheep, and in the same way, often it gets said that a pastor is like an overseer to a church. They say it's another name for a shepherd in context. So it's almost like a pastor over his church is like a shepherd to God's flock. And so that's where we see something come in about where shepherds can kind of exist in all different kinds of ways, and there's a place where we also just kind of see in 1 Timothy chapter 3, a little reference as to what things qualify you to be, what they consider a shepherd or an overseer to the God's flock. And then there's also a passage in Titus that does that, and there's also some passage, it's either in 1st or 2nd Peter, I think it's actually 1st Peter, where it says, be shepherds to God's flock, not because you must, but because you are willing, not lording it over, but setting examples. So we see, of all things, that there's all kinds of ways that this kind of comes in little terms and verses and scriptures. And to think about how one thing I find out is that to qualify to be a preacher or a pastor, you must be called by God, because you look in Ecclesiastes at the beginning and it says the preacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem, which was in reference to King Solomon, who was a son of King David and also a king of Jerusalem. And there's an original word in that passage that says kahileth in the Hebrew, which means one whom God has chosen to lead over the people. And then that same pastor who pointed that out talked about how there are people who say, I want to go to seminary and get a career as a minister. And then somebody might ask them, but why don't you go to medical school and get a career as a doctor? They say, no, I want to go to seminary and get a career as a minister. And then he went on the sermon to say, it don't work that way. Because it's true, it really doesn't, because we believe that the preachers and the ministers are those who God has called to that position. I could kind of relate to that somewhat. I mean, I will tell y'all, first of all, that even after I graduated high school, I mean, knowing the fact that I just wanted to graduate high school and be out of school, I never went to college or anything like that. Never really earned enough credits in high school to go to college either, but there probably were times after that that I probably thought I wanted to go to Bible college and, you know, study to be a preacher, but it just kind of didn't work out that way for a lot of reasons. And I mean, I never went, let alone ever went to seminary, but I did study the Bible a lot on my own time. Even in the Baptist church, I tell you all, there are some preachers who have never been to Bible college. Now, my dad, of course, was one of them who did go, but all he received was a bachelor's in theology, and yet there are people like my paternal grandfather who never went to college at all, and yet he pastored churches. And there were people like my maternal grandfather who he went to Lexington Baptist College, a school which at that time did not have enough classes to offer bachelor's degrees. So all he learned in his school was the Bible, and all he received was a certain diploma that you receive from there, or did at the time, if you completed a certain Bible study course. And other than that, he went to business school. So as we kind of come to see here, you know, as far as this stuff goes, even he pastored churches for many years of his life. And so, but I could probably also tell you, even for me, that if I had ever made it into Bible college or seminary, I wouldn't have succeeded, wouldn't have been able to stay with it, wouldn't have been able to keep up with what I was paying for, let alone really pass all the classes. That's just kind of how school was to me, even when I was in high school. Nonetheless, I still managed to graduate, which was kind of a wonderful thing. And I say that probably the best I can do for y'all is kind of quote the Bible. I have even done music on it for many years because I studied it on my own terms. and spend a lot of my own time doing it. I could never be a teacher though, because I do not have that gift. I could never be any kind of a leader because I do not have that gift. But I say that from what I learn about the Bible, I have a way of sharing it. Even when you do a spiritual gifts inventory in churches, one of the gifts that you might fall under is pastor shepherd. But that does not mean you're qualified to pastor a church, because everybody kind of doesn't see everything the same way. And God doesn't call all of us to be preachers and pastors and ministers. And I think in my case, there were the years in my life that God had called me to be a songwriter and a psalmist, and these days I feel He calls me to do this. He kind of calls me to do my woodworking and to share the gospel through that. There were all different kinds of callings people had over the years. You think about Carmen, who was the Christian musician over the years, and the one who also preached as he was on the stage. He was the music evangelist in those days. Of course, God's already called him home to heaven now, but we also know that there's probably going to be others who will be called to that. There were times in my life when I thought I was, but I think over time I've discovered that I might be a little bit more called to do this kind of business with the wood and the sandpaper and the tools, and do this kind of ministry for my kind of work in life, I say. And this is where I reach out to somebody and kind of try to share a little gospel word or two with somebody, so they know just where these little words and vessels of praise and effort and honor and glory come from. So I say that there is just so much we find in life, so much we do, and I want to even get back to a little other thing about this 23rd Psalm. Like I mentioned in a little video I recorded and uploaded yesterday, where how that psalm starts out with the words, "The Lord is my shepherd." But I say back in the 80s, when my grandfather still owned a store called Wildcat Country in the Turfland Mall here in Lexington, and the Hamilton Limited, where he sold his paintings, the Wildcat Country was a store that carried Kentucky apparel. And as for what was in there, it was all based on the Kentucky Wildcats, the Wildcats football team, the Wildcats basketball team, anything having to do with the University of Kentucky and the Wildcat mascot. So that was what he sold. And back in those days, Eddie Sutton was the coach of the basketball team. And in those days, there were these little ball caps he had in his store, which in Old English lettering it said, "The Lord is my shepherd." And right under that it had a picture of a Wildcat and Eddie Sutton, and under that in plain print it said, "But Eddie Sutton is my coach." Now I tell you no more than I've really kept up with UK basketball over the years. I don't know all the details of all the stories, but I will tell y'all they're real popular in my town. They're real popular in my state. A lot of people go for that team. There's so many UK alumni around here who really went for that team and loved the Wildcats all those years and kind of rooted for them, cheered for them all the way. And I tell you one thing is that I've had friends in my life who they've judged me for the fact that I was so indifferent to Wildcats and sports and things like that. And I just had one simple thing to tell them, and that is, Whether or not you care about UK basketball won't matter for all eternity. Whether or not you know Jesus will. So, these are the things I come on to preach and to tell people. And if we all know that the Lord is our shepherd, He will lead us beside still waters. He will comfort us with His rod and staff, lay us down in green pastures, and all that the little psalm tells us He will do. We are sure blessed and comforted by the Lord our God. Even Jesus Himself came to earth, and He even spoke a parable in John chapter 10 about being the shepherd at the gate. He said, whether you go in or out the gate, I'm the only way. He said, nobody comes to the Father except through me. I and the Father are one. So we know by that means Jesus was preaching and telling people that He is God. He is God in the person of the Son of God. He is the good shepherd of all things and the great physician. Many names He's been called: Lamb of God, Lion of Judah. We don't worship the elephant or the donkey, but we only worship the Lamb. And that is neither Republicans or Democrats, but only Jesus Christ Himself. We come around just to say that I appreciate you all coming on and watching. So much more to say and do and to take care, and see you all in the next video. See ya. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. I hope to see you in the next video. Stay tuned.